Thank you all for tuning in. The following is a presentation of Bald Spots Productions. Be sure to like, comment, and share. Subscribe, follow, whatever it is you've got to do to kick that algorithm into gear and help us reach more people. Yes, it is I, your humble host, Bill Hatch the Third, coming to you live from the palatial home studios of Bald Spots Productions here in the beautiful city of Malden, Missouri. Joining me from more than acceptable safe social distances are my guests for today. We have Tom Walker. How you doing, Tom?
Fine. Nice to meet you, Bill.
Pleasure's all mine. And Chris Miles. How you doing, Chris?
Hey, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Now, Tom Walker. Tom is an author. He's written the book. Wait a minute. Run Toward the Sun.
Run Toward the Blazing Sun.
The Blazing Sun. Yes, we can't forget the blazing part. And
no.
Chris is the anti financial planner and cash flow expert. And so this is going to be an interesting discussion. As I don't know that we could have two more different people. But as I always start off with the same question of everyone, we'll get started with that. Who are you, or what are you reading? And we'll start with you, Chris. Who are you reading right now?
Right now, I'm reading Jocko Willink. His the book. Oh my gosh, why am I blanking out right here?
Because I asked.
Extreme Ownership.
Extreme Ownership. Okay. And what's
and that's Extreme Leadership. It's one of the two.
What's the big takeaway so far from the book?
Yeah, from Extreme Ownership, really, it's a great leadership book. If you're really, it's talking from a Navy SEALs perspective, right? And how they have been successful, especially when they, got more popular after the Iraqi wars and things like that. But really about how to be someone who takes full accountability and responsibility for what happens with you and your team. And really just great, especially as I'm starting to lead a team now, where I used to be just the self-employed guy. Now I've got a team of a small team of 9 people. It's a very different game, right? When you're having to deal with other people, and especially when you're kind of naturally introverted anyways, you definitely have to realize that leadership is really key for moving your vision forward.
As a would-be leadership guide, I'm actually writing a series of books on leadership, on something I call ethical leadership right now. And it's designed to bring the team and the community at large together to prop up the leader and bring everyone together. I'm always interested in leadership books and what they entail. Okay, great. Now, Tom, what are you reading right now?
Well, not so much reading, but publishing my book, The Whitebird Story: A Conspiracy of Silence.
I saw that.
Yeah, the Whitebird was a plane that tried to beat Charles Lindbergh across the Atlantic. In actual fact, they did, but nobody knew it. They just disappeared. They were supposed to land in front of the Statue of Liberty. There were thousands of people waiting for them to welcome them, but they never turned up, and nobody ever found them. They found no wreckage. They found nothing. Nobody knows for 90-odd years what happened to them. Well, I found out what happened to them. I was up in Maine, and they crashed there. And I have the crash site. I have everything to it. And I'm trying to, we're putting together an expedition to go there and dig up the plane, because when they crashed, they were killed by local woodsmen. They wanted to steal the engine out of the plane for their woodyard. And so they did that, and then they realized that the whole world was looking for these guys, so they buried it out in the wilderness there. And I have a picture of the crash site. It's on the wall here. I got on Google Earth and honed in on the place where the informant had given me where the plane was, and sure enough, there was the mark still there where the plane dug a trench when it came down.
Goodness.
Still there, and we're going there on the 9th of May this year is the anniversary, the 97th anniversary of the crash. So we're going there, and we're going to find what we can find to prove the story.
Wow. That's exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting.
The Whitebird was a seaplane of some kind, wasn't it?
No, what it was a special. In 1927, nobody had flown across the Atlantic before, so they offered
Right.
25,000 to the first person that could do it. And we know Charles Lindbergh was the winner, but 2 weeks before he did it, these two Frenchmen tried to beat him coming the other way.
Okay.
Well, when you come from the other direction, you're pushing the wind because the winds come from the west, so you're pushing the wind. And I think they run out of fuel and crashed in Maine. But then they were badly treated by the locals that found them.
Wow.
Instead of helping them, they killed them. And how I found out that story was quite simple, really, because, Maine people are they keep themselves to themselves. Unless you were born in Maine, you're not one of them. And they will not talk to you or tell you anything. But I managed to get the story from a grandson of one of those that did the killing, and he was in the middle of a divorce with his wife. They weren't talking to each other. It was the wife that told me the story to start with. And then she said, well, if you don't believe me, go and talk to him. So I went to talk to him, and he told me the same story. So we know it's true.
Wow. Okay.
Actually, he told me when he went to school, he was only 8 years old. He said, and his teacher wanted him to write something, so he wrote about the Whitebird that he'd heard behind closed doors. And when he went home, he said, my grandfather ripped it up in front of me and threw it on the floor and said, don't you ever talk about the Whitebird. So I said to him, do you know where the Whitebird is buried? He said, yes. I said, could you show me on the map? He said, yes, it's right there. Put his finger on the map. Well, when I got back to Florida and wrote the story, I decided to get on Google Earth and home in on this spot. And that's when the crash site came up. Still there to this day. Trees are growing in it, of course, but it's there. Sure.
Wow. That's amazing. I love that kind of historical stuff. Got that from my father. My dad's a huge history buff. And for his retirement, I bought him a 200-year-old cane that had the marker on it of who it was gifted from and who it was gifted to, and he's been putting off trying to find out who those people are, but I know he's thought about it.
Well, we have an old saying in England where I come from, and it's he who doesn't respect the past doesn't deserve a future.
Okay. I haven't heard that one before. Of course, I've heard the one, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, but I'm sure just about everybody's heard that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. And so, Chris, what exactly is an anti-financial planner? Does that mean that, is it like matter and antimatter? If you meet a financial planner, are you going to explode? Or
well, they might not like me, that's for sure, because I pretty much tell people to not listen to their advice because it's pretty much a sellout. If I were to put it simply, and that's because I used to be one, right? I used to be that salesman in a suit trying to sell people on financial plans when really it was just trying to sell them financial products that may or may not have helped them actually get results. And when I grew up, I wasn't, I was raised by my parents. They taught me good values. Your word is your bond. That really, like, you follow your passions, you follow your dreams, right? And those kind of things. Well, the one thing they didn't really teach me much about was money, because when it was about money, it was always about how there was never enough of it, especially because they were Depression era type of parents. So they would always tell me things like, hey, well, we can't afford this. What do you think I am, made of money? Money doesn't grow on trees, those kind of sayings you're told your whole life. And so I vowed I wanted a different path than that. And so I remember, going to college, and I thought, well, I can tell that in college here, I'm not going to necessarily get, real financial prosperity. I can get a good job, I can get some security, but I won't get freedom. So I decided I wanted to actually branch out and go into the entrepreneur space. And the first business that came up that intrigued me was being a financial advisor, not realizing they take anybody off the street as long as you can pass a test and not be a criminal. So I went that route, did that for 4 years. And after 4 years, my dad said, well, when are you going to become my financial advisor? Now, I never expected that, because my father, you got to understand, he was very guarded with his money, cheap son of a gun, right? He's the kind of guy that, he wouldn't just not tip if he got bad service. He would steal the plates from that restaurant if he got poor service. So that's how cheap my dad is. He had a wide variety of dishware from various restaurants that give him poor service. But I sat down with him and he said, "Okay, Chris, I'm 61 years old at this time. This is about 20 years ago. It's like I'm 61 years old. I want to retire today." And I said, "All right, well, based on this, you've paid off your house, you're debt free, you've stuffed money in your retirement plan for decades. Here's the deal, Dad. If you want to retire today, you better hope you die in 5 years because that's how long your money will last you." And he said, "Well, that's not what I wanted to hear. What else can I do?" And I said, I don't know, because you did everything right, according to what I teach as a financial advisor. And that bothered me because I found myself on a similar path as him. I was trying to be cheap and save a lot of money, turn off the AC in the summer, turn off the heat in the winter so I can save a little bit of scraps to put away into the stock market, only to find out that my future, which was my dad, it hadn't worked. And even worse, if that weren't painful enough, a few weeks later, I'm talking with a friend who left from my company to go do real estate investing. And he's telling me, "Well, Chris, how many of your clients really are financially free where they don't worry about money?" I said, "Well, they all worry about money. Even the ones that are retired still worry that they might outlive their money." He said, "Okay, great. Good way to help nobody." Well, how about this? How many of you guys as financial advisors are financially free, not off the commissions you've been earning, but actually doing these investments? And as I was really honest with myself, and I realized there was guys working in that field since the late 1970s, and yet they couldn't retire either, I realized there was a problem. I said, none of them can. There's your problem, Chris. And that got me down a journey, almost like this own matrix rabbit hole, right? Where I took the red pill, so to speak, to find out that really financial advising has not worked. It has about a 1% success rate overall for people that actually feel like they can be comfortable in retirement. Sadly enough, I couldn't make it work. And so a couple months later, I quit. I couldn't keep teaching what I was teaching and keep my integrity intact because I knew better. And so I started going more the real estate path and doing something that has been proven to work. And lo and behold, the next year I was able to retire when I was 28 years old, with very much sooner than I expected, doing it with the traditional way of retirement plans. And as a result, of course, when you're 28 years old, almost 29, and your friends are all working and people want to know why in the heck you don't have a job, naturally you get a lot of questions. And so a little while later, I actually came out of retirement to teach people how I did what I did, like how I got out of the rat race, right? How I was able to become quote unquote work optional, where I work because I want to, not because I have to. And that's really what I've been teaching people ever since for the last 17 years.
That's awesome. So you've written a book, I'm assuming, about this too?
Yeah, I'm not much of a writer. I hate writing, but I have written a few short books, when at least until I lost patience.
So what's your primary means of teaching people then?
Primarily through this, actually, a podcast, whether I'm on somebody else's show. Okay. I also have my own Money Ripples podcast that we're actually releasing our 800th episode right now. So, wow. So very excited about that. We're now 10 years into our podcast, and that's that's the one podcast I did after the previous podcast I did 4 years prior to that, and even did some AM talk radio and whatnot. And so that's primarily how I teach, is through that, through master classes like online, YouTube, those kind of things. Really, it's just doing this all virtually. In fact, 2020 was awesome because by 2015 I went virtual. So when 2020 hit and they said, "Hey, you got to stay at home," I said, "Well, that's what I do anyways." Now you just made it cool, right? So as a result, that's what I've been doing. I've been teaching more virtually.
Okay, cool. No, that's pretty neat. Yeah, I'm almost up to my 100th episode of the podcast. So not quite as many as you.
It's still a huge accomplishment. Most never make it past 10.
Yeah. 2020 did kind of change everything. I'd originally envisioned, because I was still living in Southern California, and we had so everybody I was interviewing wasn't that far away, and so I had this vision of having everybody over to the apartment, and we'd have beer and we'd just chat and have the microphones set up there, and then 2020, 2019, 2020 happened, and it's like nope, nobody's going anywhere. So here's Zoom.
Yeah.
And yeah. So that's where this all kind of started. But yeah, that's pretty neat. Little asynchronous learning. Um, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Let's see then. Well, what else? What else can we talk about then? Well, what exactly then do you teach people to do if it's not the traditional financial plan?
Yeah, I teach them to. So it's not that you shouldn't be wise with your finances. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying you go live La Vida Loca and go blow all your money today, right? It's not like that. But really, the big thing is I teach three key things: is get lean, get
Mm-hmm.
liquid, and get out. So get lean just means be a wise steward of your money, right? It doesn't mean
Sure.
that you get so cheap that you're living in a cardboard box. It doesn't mean you live on rice and beans like our good old buddy Dave Ramsey likes to shame people into doing, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
not what I talk about at all. It's more about being wise with your money, spending money where you actually brings you joy in your life, but being wise as well as putting money away and using that money to get it, out eventually, right? So really get lean just means track your money, make sure you're responsible of what's coming in and what's going out. Get liquid means that you actually have savings, right? Like you actually have liquid cash. One of the biggest mistakes I made in the last recession, when we went in that Great
Mm-hmm.
Recession in 2007 through 2009, is that although I had some cash, I didn't have enough cash to weather that storm. And so it
Mm-hmm.
put me in a big financial bind. Actually, this is why people say, well, Chris, how are you able to retire twice? Easy. I screwed up the first time and then I had to do it again, by 2016. And so that's the big thing is that you need to have cash liquid. But unfortunately, almost everybody in the financial world will tell you to put your money in prison. They'll say, lock up all your money in the equity of your house, right? They'll lock it all up there, pay off your house like my dad did. But then you get to that point and you say, well, now what? Because that doesn't pay me income. That doesn't mean anything
Right.
other than I'm not making a payment, but it's not giving me income. What do I do? My dad was at a loss. Well, when you try to lock up your money in your house, problem is you may not always be able to get it back out. You may not be able to always sell that property. In the Great Recession, although I locked up a lot of money and equity in my home, because the recession and what was happening and values were dropping, they didn't want me to cash out money for my mortgage. So then my next goal was, can I sell my house? But as values were dropping and the credit crisis was happening with banks, I couldn't even sell the house. And so what happened is that eventually I went upside down in my home, even though I had lots of equity before. Now all of a sudden I was upside down. I owed more on my mortgage than what it was worth anymore, right? And that was a dangerous place to be. I would have been better off having my money in cash, having it liquid. Same thing. People are told to throw their money in retirement plans like 401ks and IRAs. But same problem happens here is that, again, it's locked up. As long as you work with that company, you can't really access it. And if you do try to access it, they're going to slap you with a 10% penalty and taxes. Right. So it's like buying your own car, but then getting your and then having to ask your parents for permission to get the car keys. That's what it's like, right? It's really ridiculous. And so if you can get your money liquid and in your possession, even if it's a simple savings account, even if it earns nothing, that's still better than having it locked away where you can't get to it when you need it the most. And that's where you get it out. Once you have that money liquid, then you get it out to invest in places that actually generate income. The problem with the stock market is even if you happen to be lucky to save up to $1 million, which I mentioned, it's a less than 1% success rate. Fidelity has 45 million clients. Only 810,000 have at least $1 million. And that's always been like the big goal. Dave Ramsey tells you save $100 a month for 40 years, you'll have $1 million. He's wrong. One, the stock market doesn't give you that high of return like he falsely claims. And then two,
Right.
the truth is it just doesn't work that way, right? It never gets you to that point. You actually only get a quarter of the money than what you think. So people that actually finally get to $1 million, even if you get to that point, then you're told to live on 3% a year. So you're only supposed to
Mm-hmm.
pull out 30,000 of your million that you have. That's like living below the poverty line. You're a broke millionaire, essentially, right?
Right.
And so I had one client actually in Southern California, more on the eastern side. He was one of the top ranking generals in the National Guard there. And he actually had $1 million he happened to save up by the time he was 60. His financial advisor said, well, great. Well, now luckily you have your pension and Social Security eventually, but you have your pension. That'll help because you should only pull out $30,000 a year from your $1 million retirement fund. He said, I live in California. Nobody can live on 30,000 a year. Homeless people live on 30,000 a year, right? So he said, I can't do that. And so he eventually found our podcast. He started listening to a bunch of them, found ours, and then reached out to us for help. And so we started doing things like, doing various aspects of real estate, not buying in your backyard in California, because anything in the western half of the US here is horrible. But he bought duplexes out more east where there's bigger cash flow. So he bought a couple of duplexes that he does not manage. Somebody else manages it for him. He also got into some like oil and gas investments that were not based on whether they find oil, because the oil was already there. It was based on them getting paid rent from the oil companies and getting shares in the royalties. And then he also did some things like apartment investing, where he pooled his money with other investors to get paid on the business of that apartment building. Long story short, that $1 million is now paying him between $100,000 and $130,000 a year, not just $30,000 that he's hoping to not run out of money by the time he dies. And that's the difference, right? Like we were always taught to accumulate money and grow it and compound it forever. But instead we're teaching you how to accelerate it. How do you actually get this to pay you real income?
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I know. That's part of why I left California, was because it's just so darned expensive, and out there, I just there was no point. I mean, everything I do is remote anyway, so it doesn't matter that I live in a little town of 4,000 people now, because I have my fingers reaching out to the world through my keyboard. But
it's funny you mentioned Missouri too, because I've had a lot of friends feel like they have to move to Missouri. They're like, I don't know why. I don't even know anything about Missouri, but I feel like I'm called to it.
Well, part of why we moved here, there were two reasons why my cousin and I moved here. One was because we could afford a house, and the other is that my parents live about an hour away from here. And so,
nice.
So it's like I've got family nearby, so it made a lot of sense to move here. But yeah, there's a lot of things that are different out here than there are than in California, and there are a lot of good reasons to move here. Food prices is not one of them. Turns out food's more expensive here, but
go figure.
Yeah, go figure. No, it actually makes sense, because there's not so much competition. There's like in town there is one grocery store, and it's pretty similar. And even though my parents' town is about 15,000 people, it's still got one main grocery store and an Aldi. And so the competition is greater in Southern California, so they have to run a lot leaner and keep the prices closer to what they pay for things. So,
well, it's like Tom, realize when you live in Maine, right? It's the same kind of thing. Yeah. You try to fly in the food, they just knock you out of the sky or take your engine away. So that doesn't work either.
Yeah, I don't actually live in Maine.
I know you don't live there, but you probably found out visiting it.
Yeah.
So Tom, tell us a bit about Run Toward the Blazing Sun.
Well, that was my first book. Here it is, Run Toward the Blazing Sun. Well, when I was a young man in the early 70s, I had this crazy idea that I could take people on adventure holidays, cut out airfares, cut out hotel accommodation, and travel in a 12-seat Land Rover camping, and put together groups of people. So I went to the Turkish government and put the proposition to them, and they said, yeah, we need tourists in our country. We'll help you. We'll distribute your brochures and put you on television and stuff. When I got to Turkey, the damn government had been overthrown, and they arrested me and said I'd insulted the government. I couldn't even speak Turkish. And I escaped into the mountains, and they chased me for 2 weeks. They got roadblocks everywhere trying to catch me. And I eventually got to the border between Greece and Turkey, and it was a big river. And the only way out was across the bridge, and they were waiting for me with machine guns. So I waited for the sun to go down in the west, so that once they started firing at me, they'd be firing into the sun and be blinded. And I also had a British Land Rover with the steering wheel on the right, because we drive on the left. So I made a dummy on the left-hand side. I took a suitcase, put it end up on the seat, and put a T-shirt on it, made a head out of a towel. And then I hit it 75 miles an hour and smashed it across. They opened up on me, but they couldn't see me to get me. Wow. So that was that Run Toward the Blazing Sun.
Wow.
That was my first
exciting.
Book. Yeah.
Okay. How many books have you written?
Just those two at the moment.
Oh, just the
with
zoo
the
at
one.
the moment? Oh, okay. With
Yeah,
the one getting published? Wow. What
I've got
got you into into writing? What made you want to write?
well, my grandkids kept on asking, "What do you do when you was a young man, Grandpa?" So I just wrote it. I figured, when I die, at least I'll leave a book behind. I got an award for it. I won an award for this, both of them actually. Got awards for them,
Wow.
but it's not made me rich. Put it that way. When I got back to England, I went to the British government to try and help, and they said, well, "What do you want us to do? Send a gunboat in? You shouldn't take people to these weird countries. You're lucky you got out alive." So I said, "Well, to hell with you then. I'm going to get a sailboat and I'm going to sail around the world. And the next time I go to a damn country, if they don't like me, then get off my boat and leave me alone." So I bought a trimaran and I followed the English coast to the end of the country. And I said to this old fisherman, "How do you sail around the world?" He said, "Head south till the butter melts, then turn west." Well, I ended up in Miami. And I went ashore. And then the first American I met, I said, "Hey, man, they told me the streets of America were paved with gold. How do you get rich?" He said, "Build a bike nobody in the world can ride and you'll get rich." He was joking. I didn't get rich, but I did build the bike. And for 40 years, I've been traveling around America with these biker events, and I set the bike up, and I give them $100 if they can ride it 10 feet. It's got two wheels, pedals forward, got a seat, got handlebars, looks just like any other bike. I get on it, ride it all around like it's nothing. You get on it, you won't get across the starting line. So that's my next book, Colonel Tom and His Crazy Bike. But that's how I've earned a living.
That sounds so very Florida.
I get all these big bad bikers come back every year. They say, "We got you this year, Colonel. We built a bike like that. We've been practicing." I said, "Yeah, you've been practicing on your bike, not mine. Go ahead. $100, 10 feet. I'll tell you what, I'll put my finger on the ground where you're going to fall off. Just give me the damn money and shut up. You ain't going to do it." They can't do it. They can't ride it. The main difference is when you turn left, it goes right. And when you turn right, it goes left. Well, you'd think that that's pretty easy. Just keep it straight, right? Your brain can't do it. Won't let you do it. And unless you know the secret. And, of course, I'm the only one that knows the secret. Yeah.
So you're going to put that in
your book? What I've been doing. Yeah, that's another book I've got. Well, maybe because I'm 85 now. I don't know how long I got left. But, yeah. It'll be called Colonel Tom and His Crazy Bike. That's another thing. How the hell did I become a colonel? Well, I started a car auction in South Carolina, an English-style car auction, and apparently during the Civil War here, they used to leave behind a soldier to sell off the spoils of war when they were heading south. So if you become an auctioneer in the south of America, like, the southern states, they make you a colonel.
Okay.
I went to school for 2 weeks. I went to school for 2 weeks to become an auctioneer, and they made me a colonel. Because the auction never took off. But I kept the name Colonel Tom. So
that's how Colonel Sanders got his name. He didn't
exactly right. Yeah, he was a Kentucky colonel like me. But it's kind of stuck with me for years, so I keep with it. Yeah.
Okay.
But that was really good, traveling around America and, taking the crazy bike and meeting all these bikers and stuff. Because, when I first started doing it, they said, "Man, you can't go out there and humiliate those bikers, man. They'll kill you, man. They got guns, they got knives." Nothing. They're the greatest people you could wish to meet. They're doctors, lawyers, different people. They ride their $40,000 Harley Davidson. They love it. They throw their arms around me when they see me. "Oh, man, where have you been? Where's that bicycle?" Yeah.
Have your kids or grandkids ever accused you of lying or making up these stories?
Yeah, probably all the time, yeah. But, the bike folds up and goes in a suitcase because I can travel all over the world with it like that and set the show up if I want. I'm not doing much of it now because I'm 85, but when they ask me to do it, I do it.
Yeah. From escaping Turkey to riding the unrideable bicycle. I mean, that's a pretty drastic change, and then of course becoming an auctioneer even, like that's it seems like they don't connect.
Yeah. It didn't work out too good, the other thing. But
got you a colonelship.
Yeah, got me a colonelship. Listen, it take me 50 years to become a colonel in England, where I come from. And then I go to school for 2 weeks in America and become a colonel. Well, how can I beat that? Yeah. But this Whitebird story is just absolutely fantastic. I don't know how I was lucky enough to get the story, because there have been other companies and people for years have been looking all over the place. They look in Newfoundland, they're looking all over the place, in Maine too. But they wouldn't open up and tell them the story. See, they kept it secret. And it was only because I was in the middle of that divorce situation that I got the story. She said, I don't need to keep the secret anymore, she said, because I'm not married to him anymore. But this is the story, and if you don't believe me, go and talk to him. Well, he broke down in front of me. He said, I've known about it since I was a child, he said, but they made me shut up. He said, it was wrong. He said, those guys were heroes. They did something no man had ever done before. Flew across here and they shot him and killed him. So that was that. But getting someone to believe my story is hard because, first of all, people don't know about the Whitebird. And secondly, I don't have any physical proof at this point. But we're going to get it in May. We're going to dig that thing up, or part of it. There's got to be something there.
Right.
You ever thought about pitching that to the History Channel?
Tried that, but you never get through to the right people. They don't listen to you. Try to get on the news and the television and all kinds of things. Just don't. Nobody seems to want to care, especially young people today. They don't care about stuff. They're too busy with them smartphones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I found out a long time ago the old saying about the news, if it bleeds, it leads, is definitely true. I was trying to be a professional photographer, and I happened to be near a fire, a mobile home fire, and it was this total it was a total loss. But there were huge flames and firefighters running in and out of the smoke, and I got a bunch of really great pictures of them. But even the local paper, the one that like shows up on your doorstep, was like, nobody got hurt, so we're not gonna do anything about it. And it was just it was just amazing that nobody cares unless somebody gets hurt.
Right.
That's the thing. It's a murder mystery.
The two pilots, they crashed in the wetlands area of Maine where nobody ever goes. And, you can walk on the ground, but 2 inches down you hit water. So nobody ever goes there. You can't even get to it by road. You have to go up a river and then up a stream to get to it. It's quite a ways to get to. And so that's where they unfortunately crashed. And I'll show you. I got a picture, if you can see this. I took this from Google Earth. And
wow.
Well, this is the area. You see that straight line?
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the plane crashed. You see, this is in an area where nothing grows in a straight line. God doesn't grow things in a straight line. There's all higgledy-piggledy. But there it is. And this was where the guy I was talking to put his finger on the map. He said the plane crashed there. Well, there it is.
Yeah.
There's the proof, but they still don't believe me until we find a piece of the plane.
Right. But, when you find a piece of the plane, you'll have to come back on and share it with us.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Well, I plan to do it on the anniversary of the crash, which was the 9th of May, 1927. Lindbergh didn't fly across until the 20th. So they beat him.
Right.
But, of course, no one knows about it. It was kept quiet. And, of course, all the people that did it or involved in it are dead. It was 97 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I just feel so strong about it because in this book here, Run Toward the Blazing Sun, when I was on the run in the mountains, I had two beautiful French girls with me, and they were helping me to escape. And I've always had a debt feeling towards the French. And then when the idea of this white bird came up, I thought, well, if I find the white bird for the French, that's paying back for what they did for me. And so that's the reason I got involved in it.
Okay.
And I just think it's fantastic that two men were so brave to get on, to say goodbye to their people, to get on a plane made of wood and canvas. They got up in the air and they dropped the wheels because they were going to land in front of the Statue of Liberty. And the only thing that's left of the plane museum there, and they have the wheels that they dropped. But that's all that was left, and nobody ever found anything because these woodsmen didn't want it found. Right. They kept it quiet. But it's coming out now with the modern technology being able to home in on that spot there. At the end of that line I just showed you is where the plane is. It's going to be buried there. All the pilots are going to be buried there. I don't even think they buried it because of the water table being so high. I think what they did is they burnt most of the plane made of wood, and then the cockpit part, they put the pilots back in it and covered it over with bushes, I think, but we don't know. There's nobody left alive to tell us.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're going to go on this adventure, and
another adventure. Yeah.
Another adventure for Colonel Tom.
Yeah, I guess so. Life is one big adventure.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's not something many 85-year-olds would undertake.
Well, listen, I was brought up in London during the bombing, the Blitz of London, because, they were dropping bombs and we were running in and out of air raid shelters and things. And, I've just learnt to survive. I don't know how I survived to 85, but here I am. This is not a wig, by the way. This is my real hair. No, it's a wig. No, it's my real hair. Yeah. Well, I hope we find something. And I hope that, at least the French can say, look, we were first. We were across there. That's all. And it doesn't put down what Lindbergh did. He went by himself. And he flew non-stop by himself. And that's a great thing. But he had the wind behind him, you see. That's made it easier for him. But for them, it was hard.
Yeah.
I don't know why they killed them, other than you would have thought
Lindbergh had that fly in the cockpit with him. So.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, that's an interesting story. This one here, I mean, I'm the only man in the world, I think, that's ever escaped from a country by blinding the eyes of the border guards with the sun. I thought they would have made a movie out of it, and I would have been rich.
Right now.
No, nobody ever has. Yeah, never approached me. But I'm happy to be in America. I think there are two things that are most important in life. That's your health and your freedom. And we've got it here. We've got health, we've got freedom.
Yeah.
So it's lovely being in the States, and I never listen. And I've always been grateful because I, was brought up with the bombs dropping and everything. I've always been grateful that the Americans came over and helped us beat off the Germans. Without it, I would have been speaking German, probably.
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
Anyway, I love being in America.
I lived in Southern California almost all my life, and can't speak Spanish.
Well, we got a lot of Spanish people here in Florida too.
Yeah.
Mostly Cubans, come.
Yes. I love their sandwiches and their cigars.
Yeah, me too.
Yep.
I don't know.
So Chris,
that sounds interesting. What you do? I don't know. I don't know where to go with that.
Yeah, where can we? What's the name of the podcast again? The Money Ripples.
Yeah, Money Ripples podcast. Yep.
Money
Ripples
on
anything,
podcast.
iTunes, YouTube, anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Okay. Sounds a lot like this. Yeah, I put it out on about a half dozen or so different platforms. But yeah. No. So what made you decide, Chris, to do your teaching as a podcast?
That's an interesting question, because the first podcast I did started at the end of 2008. So it was before podcasts really became a thing. The whole purpose really was to really save myself some time and hassle. Because you know how you get those commonly asked questions, people always want to know the same thing over and over, and especially when they were clients. And so I said, well, rather than trying to explain it over and over to different people at different times, what if I just record it? So if they ask me the question, I could say, go listen to this podcast, right? And so I started to do it that way. Was like, what are these frequently asked questions people keep asking, or maybe should be asked questions they should be asking? And so I record those and just point to those as teaching tools. And then eventually I stopped that podcast after about 4 years. I did about 80 episodes of that podcast. And then I took a break for a couple years, but then I went on another show. I went on a show called Entrepreneur on Fire with John Lee Dumas. Actually, even through him, I even co-wrote a book with him and Tim Ferriss, who wrote the 4 Hour Work Week.
Okay, yeah.
Only did a chapter. Like I said, I only do short stuff. But in any case, I got on that podcast, had so much fun. I said, you know what? I want to do a podcast again. So that's when I launched. It used to be the Chris Miles Money Show, turned into the Money Ripples podcast later on. But at that point, I was having like a little midlife crisis, because I thought, well, what if I die right now? What would I want my young kids to know? Because I have, of my own children, I have 6 of my own kids. And then my wife, she has 2 I got remarried back in 2016. And so she brought 2 from her previous marriage. I brought 6. So we have the Brady Bunch. Unfortunately, there's no room for Alice. So I'm Alice. I have to cook and clean. But, in any case, like, I had a lot of kids, and I knew they were young, and I wanted them to know what I had learned and gained experience-wise. So I started kind of recording it, not just for my clients, but also for my children. Like, what could I pass on to make sure that they knew what I knew? And it really wasn't until probably about 2016, 2017, I realized, oh, wait a minute, this could actually teach a lot more than just clients and my kids. And so I kept going with it. Even after I was able to retire the second time, I still kept recording, kept doing shows, and I've been doing it ever since. And really, it's like the number one thing that our people consume in our community. They're really just using that as a way to get that free education, a way that I can give back, because the whole purpose of Money Ripples, right? That ripple effect that you can create through people's lives. And when you're blessed financially, you have a greater capacity to bless the lives of those around you. And I feel like it's kind of that duty, like kind of like what Tom was saying, the way he wants to give back to France, right? For me, it's the same thing. Is I feel like I've been very blessed, and what can I do to give back? I can live very comfortably financially, just with me and my family. But although some people would say, "Oh, that's so nice, you think about your family," I think that's one of the most selfish things you can ever do, is just think about you and your family. I think the family expands beyond our own bloodlines, right? It's something that's across the human race. And so I figured, what can I do to really create a ripple effect to bless more and more lives? And that's why we really have a vision to create 1,000 financially independent families by 2030, is just doing that very same thing.
Wow. That's awesome.
Great thinking.
For sure.
Yeah.
So you've done how many hundreds of episodes, did you say?
By the time this airs, it'll be over 800. Yeah.
800. Wow. Wow.
Not including the 76 or 80 episodes I did on the previous podcast, and maybe another 20 or so I did on AM talk radio back in the day in the mid 2000s. But no, this is way more fun. I like pre-recording way better than live radio, where you get interrupted every 7 minutes by a commercial break, and you have to remember where you were on that train of thought. Right? This is so much more fun. We can have a very fluid conversation.
Yeah. Although at some point I do hope to have commercials, because it'd be nice to get paid to do this.
It's true.
What's the one piece of advice you wish you had known early on that you could give now?
Is that for me or Tom?
For well, either one of you, I guess. I hadn't thought about that, but for you, Chris.
One piece of advice I could give people that I wish I had known, I would say this. money became less mysterious to me when I realized that money wasn't about making money, which I know sounds a little weird. But I remember even as a financial advisor, money seemed kind of mysterious to me, which seems strange that I would say that, but it was hard to figure out. Like it felt like it was hard to make. It was hard to, if you don't make much of it, you don't get to keep much either, right? It's just paying bills and dying, so to speak. And what really shifted my perspective, especially when you talk about being a history buff, the thing that actually got me to question it. Remember, I had that conversation with that friend about, are my clients financially free and are other financial advisors financially free? Well, the advice he gave me, he said, Chris, if you're really serious about learning more, because I said, well, tell me more. And he didn't think I was serious. He thought I was just being an egotistical jerk. And I said, no, I'm serious. Tell me, how can I learn more? And he said, well, go get this book by Robert Kiyosaki, the guy that wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He's like, but you've already read that book. Don't read that one. Read Who Took My Money, which pretty much just says mutual funds are horrible, right? And so he said, read that book. And then he said, listen to this show that's on AM Talk Radio with these two real estate investors. And what was fascinating is that these two real estate investors talked very little about real estate. Now, occasionally they talked about their cars. They love to talk about their Jaguars or Mercedes or whatnot, which is kind of, a little ego there. But for the most part, they talked about history, especially, founding fathers, Revolutionary War era, and the things that they were discovering to try to create a new society, right? That whole American Revolution. Sorry, Tom, I know you guys were a part of that too. But, but pretty much what they learned from studying the greatest societies, even Anglo-Saxons of 6th century AD, right? And they were studying, even the tribes of Moses, and they were just studying all these cultures, ancient Rome and Greece, and what made them successful. And they talked about how that helped those countries prosper, and of course, what helped them to not prosper later on when the empires fell. And one of the things they talked about with making money, for example, was that it wasn't about making money. It was that dollars follow value created. That the one thing that's been true since the beginning of time is that money always follows value that you provide for somebody else. Whether you serve somebody else, you add value, you solve problems, you're a solutions provider, whatever it might be, that's the real root cause of money. So it's not that it takes money to make money, it takes value to create money. And when I finally internalized that, and when I started to ask the question, instead of asking, how do I make more money? I started asking, what can I do to serve somebody? How can I create a win-win? How can I add value in their life or solve a problem? That money is just a natural exchange. Once I started doing that, making money not only became very ethical, but making money actually became formulaic. It actually became predictable, and it became easier because I wasn't just trying to get lucky, right? Where we had that gambler lottery mentality, or that win-lose zero-sum game mentality, which you think somebody has to lose for you to win. So if I'm a benevolent person, I'm going to lose so that everybody else wins, right? Because there's only so much to go around. And that scarcity doesn't work. It's really an abundant world. And if you follow those principles of abundance, that's the big thing, is that you'll realize that you're not just abundant with money, but you can actually become abundant in relationships, love, health, everything that you want in life comes from having that mentality of abundance. So long story to get to your answer there, what would I teach younger people would be learn the principles that work first, then do the strategies later.
Okay, cool. Well, how about you, Tom? What would you tell?
Think twice before you go to a foreign country.
Hey,
don't be a tour guide in Turkey.
Country.
Well, this is not so foreign over here, but some of those places, especially if they're Muslim type countries, they just don't like us. They don't like Christians or whatever. And, if you say the wrong thing or you do the wrong thing, they got you trapped in their country.
Yeah.
And they can do whatever they want. Yeah, it's basically it. Yeah.
Internet's decided to drop out again. Hold on a moment.
It's amazing your stories, Tom, because I thought the biggest worry I had was going to Mexico and not getting a parasite. And you're talking about putting a dummy in the left side of your car and trying not to get, your head shot off. That's pretty incredible.
Well, I was pretty desperate to get out, you see.
That's true.
And
that is
when I got to the border and they were waiting for me, well, run toward the blazing somewhere. Just to the west, you see. I was heading west. So once they started firing, they'd be facing the sun if I waited until it went down to the right point.
How long were you in hiding?
How long was I what? I wasn't long, a month. How long was I hiding? About 2 to 3 weeks I was in the mountains, and I took the 2 French girls to Istanbul to get them on the plane to send them out because there was no way out. I went to see the British consul thinking that they'd help me, you know. They didn't want to help me. All they did was give me a map of the border. I said, you know, give me a passport so I can get out. Oh, we can't do that. Most we can do is give you a map of the border, but be careful, there are minefields on both sides of the river. He sent me to the border to die, but I didn't die. And you know what? The buggers, the Turks chased me across the bridge after they started firing at me. They chased me across the bridge. Well, when I got to the other side, amongst the Greek border guards, they stepped between me and them and told them to go back. You can't have him. He's in our country now.
You almost created an international crisis or war there, didn't you?
Well, yeah, they took me from there. They put my Land Rover on a pedestal because they thought I'd done such a great thing, that the Greeks. And then they took me 400 miles to Salonika and put me in a jail cell. Well, I was young then and impetuous, and it was hot. It was September. And I went to the bars of the cell, and there was one policeman in there. I didn't think he could speak English, but I said, "Is this what you call Greek hospitality? I come to your country for help from Turkey, and you put me in jail here." So this guy came over to the jail, and he said, "Listen," he said, "I'm sorry we've got to keep you in there." He said, "But we've got to find out if you are who you say you are before we can set you free. You don't have a passport. But if you promise me you won't try and escape, I'll show you Greek hospitality." He unlocked the cell, took me out into his Jeep, drove me all around the town, showed me all the sights, took me to a restaurant, bought me a nice meal, Greek meal. Then they took me to a place where they were singing and dancing till 1 o'clock in the morning. And then he took me back and locked me in the cell, and he said, "There you are." He said, "That's Greek hospitality. Don't you ever forget it." And I haven't. I never forgot it. If I get a chance to use the crazy bike or do anything for the Greeks, maybe they got a festival on at a church, I go there, sell the book, you know, whatever.
That's awesome.
But yeah, and then the next day, the British consul come down to the cell. Well, it was, and he said, "Tom," he said, "you're crazy. You've upset the Turks so much." He said, "They've closed up the border, and even a mouse can't get out." He said, "Here," he said, "take this emergency passport and go home." You know, that's what happened. They started laughing, you know, what? The Turks are so mad, you know, that you managed to get out.
Wow.
Anyway,
if you didn't have a career coming to America, you could have been an MI6 or something.
Yeah, could have been anything, really. I was young then, you know, and I had a family to get back to as well. You know, I wanted to get back to them. And never did that again. I think they got mad at me mainly because I had a couple of divers with me. This was in 1970. It was the infancy of scuba diving. And the Turks didn't understand why people would go under the sea for pleasure. The most they knew about diving were the sponge divers in Turkey that go down and get the sponges, and most of them are suffering with the bend. So they thought, well, these British guys, they must be doing something wrong. They must be searching for treasure or something, or going to take something. That's what started it. And, of course, I was the leader of the group, so they took me. Yeah. I managed to get the tourists out before I escaped. I went around. They let me out on bail, kind of, you know, and the British consul got me out on bail. But I wasn't allowed to leave Turkey or the campsite that we were camped on. So I went back to the people that I took there, and I told them that I'm going to try and get them out. We're going to trick them. I said, "I want you to go around and tell a few Turks, the ones that can speak English, that I'm taking you in the Land Rover to Istanbul. And it's only one road there to get Isma. They can lay traps on us. They can plant drugs on us." I said, "But we're not going to do that." I said, "You're going to tell them that, and they're going to go and tell the police where we're going." I said, "When we get outside of town, I'm going to double back to the next village and put you on a Greek boat to the island of Rhodes. And then I'm going to give you enough money to get from Rhodes to Athens, and then enough money to get home by train." I can't come with you because I have no passport. They've taken my passport, and I've got the Land Rover anyway. So that's what happened. That's how it. But I did get them out first. Well, I was responsible for them.
Sure.
Yeah. But that was 1971. It's a long time ago. It's all different now, I suppose. People go to Turkey and they think nothing. Well, at the same time this happened to me, there was another guy that was caught trying to smuggle drugs out, and they gave him life in prison, and he escaped. Billy Hayes, his name was, and they made a big movie of it. They called it Midnight Express. He made a fortune on the movie Midnight Express, and he was a criminal. He was a criminal trying to smuggle drugs out, and I was just an innocent tour guide. Anyway,
maybe you'll get your movie yet.
Yeah, getting back to what you said, my advice is don't go to foreign countries unless you have to. Yeah.
Yeah, you really have to have an in to go some places. Years ago, I was married to a Filipino woman, and her family had connections, so they were able to take me all around the country, and we didn't have any concerns about like the what was it called, the Abu Sayyaf or something like that, the terrorist organization that was active then in the Philippines and all that, because they knew the right or the wrong people, so we didn't have any problems. But yeah, it can definitely be difficult going to a foreign country where you look so different from everybody else, because they all know who you are. Yeah, when you're head and shoulders above.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. See, I'm 6'4", and they're little guys. The main thing I think was that we fought the Turks in the Gallipoli, the Battle of Gallipoli. Remember, we all went there in the First World War, trying to take the Turks' entrance to the Black Sea, and they fought us then. So the people I was dealing with, their grandfathers didn't like the British anyway because of what the British attacked them. So I didn't know that. I was so young and green, and thinking that I was taking people on adventure holidays. Sure, it was an adventure. We got more adventure than we bargained for. But it all turned out right in the end by taking the law into my own hands.
For once, that actually worked out all right.
Yeah.
Sounds like.
Yeah.
Well, glad you made it, so you could come back and tell the story. But okay.
I got a lot of good stories to tell or to write about once I reached America. Yeah. First of all, I didn't have a proper visa to be here, so and I couldn't sail back because it was against the wind. The winds come from the northeast, and I needed to go northeast to get back to England. So the only way back was to sail up the coast to New York, pick up the westerly winds, and go that way. Right, so that's what I did. I had my two kits with me, by the way, on it, and we got up as far as the Chesapeake Bay, and it's a huge bay, Chesapeake Bay in Virginia. And I thought, I'd like to do a little sailing around here before we get to New York. So I went to a place that sells charts, boat place, and I asked the guy for some charts, and he said, you've got a trimaran. He said, you don't need these charts. They're $5 a piece. He said, I've got some old ones out the back. I'll give them to you. So I said, oh, thank you very much. So I said to him, do you know any good places where I can go to in the Chesapeake Bay? Because I've never been here before. Oh, yes, he said. He gets this map out. And he says, look, he said, you're here. I think it was Newport News, Virginia. And he said, you're here. He said, now sail across the Chesapeake Bay. He said, it'll take you all day. He said, when you get over here, he said, you'll find a river. He said, go up the river. He said, when you get up the river, you'll find a creek. He said, go up the creek and tie up at the fisherman's dock, go ashore and look for Mr. White. He said, now when you find Mr. White, he said, be sure to tell him that Mr. Hudgens sent you. and he'll take care of you and your kids. So I thought, got nothing to lose. So I sailed across the Chesapeake Bay, went up this river, went up this creek, went ashore, found Mr. White. He said, okay. He said, look, he said, bring your kids. He said, come out to the house, the farmhouse where I live, and have tea with me and the wife. So we went out there, and I had tea with him and his wife. And a little while later, he said, look, you've never seen this part of America. He said, look, he said, bring your kids. I'll drive you around and show you the sights. So we're driving along there, and all of a sudden he says, who was it who told you to contact me? I said, Mr. Hudgens. He says, oh. And he had this strange look on his face, and we got a little bit further on. Who was it who told you to contact me? About 3 or 4 times he kept asking me. I said, Mr. Hudgens, Mr. Hudgens. So anyway, I'm getting worried. And then all of a sudden, we come into a village. Guess what the name of the village was? Hudgens. Everybody on this bloody island was named Hudgens. No wonder he didn't know who Mr. Hudgens was. So anyway, the funny thing happened. 22 years later, I'm doing a show there with the Crazy Bike in that area, and I'm driving along one day, and I came into Hudgens, and it all come back to me, and I started to laugh to myself, and I thought, I wonder if old Mr. White is still alive. I'll go down to the dock and see if I can find him. So I went down to the dock, and I got talking to the fishermen down there, and I told them my story, and they all laughed. And this one fisherman, he said, look, he said, thanks for telling us that story. He said, but Mr. White died about 6 years ago. He said, but being as you've been so fine to tell me about that story, we're going to tell you a story about Mr. White. So I said, okay. He said, well, he said, before Mr. White died, he got Alzheimer's disease. He said, and one night he took his wife out to a restaurant, and they were sitting in this booth, and the whole of the wall where they were sitting was mirrors, and they could see themselves in the mirrors. And Mr. White turned to his wife, and he said, you see that guy sitting there? Pointing to himself. I know that guy sitting there. I worked on board ship with that guy sitting there. And then he turned to his wife and he said, I don't know who that ugly woman is he's sitting there. They told me that after 22 years. It cracked me up. But they were nice people. Everybody I met in America has been nice people. And you couldn't wish to come to a nicer country than America. And all this bad publicity that you get here is ridiculous. They're the best people I've ever met in the world.
Well, thank you for the
I've had no trouble
on behalf of my fellow Americans.
Yeah, they miss it. It really pisses me off when I hear these people condemning America, especially my own countrymen. That when we went, you came there to help us. You didn't have to come across the Atlantic. You could have stood back here 3,000 miles of ocean to protect you and let Germany take the whole bloody lot if they wanted, but you didn't. You came and helped us, and I've always considered that something good what you did.
Well, thank you.
I get on very well with Americans. In fact, I'm in the process of becoming a citizen now myself, because I've lived here longer than I ever did in England.
Well, good luck with that, and welcome aboard.
Yeah. Just don't go to foreign countries. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've been going at this for quite a while now. And I wanna thank you both for being on. Leave the audience wanting more. Definitely want to have you back, Tom, when you have your piece of the white dove and
the white bird.
The white
it's
bird.
called Le Sou Blanc, actually. In French, it's Le Sou Blanc.
Le Sou Blanc. Okay. Yeah. And and the books are Run Toward the Blazing Sun. And,
Run Toward the Blazing Sun.
Run Toward the Blazing Sun. And then the new book is what is it?
The White Bird Story, The Conspiracy of Silence. They conspired to keep it quiet for 97 years.
Wow.
I never expected it. You see, what happened was what happened was I was down here and a friend came down from Maine and said, why don't you come up to Maine and help me find the whitebird? I said, well, I'm not a bird watcher. He said, no, he said, it's a plane. And he told me the story. And I said, what makes you think it made it across the Atlantic and crashed in Maine? He said, well, there was an old hermit here where I live, he said, who heard a plane up in the sky. He said, and there weren't any planes in Maine in 1927. He said, and he heard it crash. He said, come up with metal detectors and we'll search for it. So that was how it started. Okay. And I never dreamed in a million years it would turn into a story of murder and what have you. I just thought we'd find something in the woods, and that's where the plane crashed, and they were killed when they crashed. But no.
They weren't.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's yeah. And then Chris, it's the Money Ripples podcast. And you can find it wherever fine podcasts are offered. Before we close out, I'd like to ask if you have any final words for the nice people. And Tom, we'll start with you. Final words.
Two things are important in life: your health and your freedom. And you've got that here in the United States. We're gradually losing it, but we got it at the moment.
Yep. Hold on to it while we can.
And always remember what Amelia Earhart said. Life is more than being a passenger.
Yes, indeed. And Chris, how about you?
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. I mean, if you learn anything from Tom's story, is he's definitely not the passenger, is he? Yeah, he's definitely along for the ride. And that's the thing. It's the action you take, right? Is what is it you're going to do with your life? How are you going to make it? Because it's really up to you. You have full power control to make your life the way you want to make it. So go and make that decision today.
Yeah.
I will concur with both of you gentlemen. And so once again, thanks for being on the show. And to all of you out there listening and viewing this, thank you. And remember to be safe out there, wash your hands, and stay tuned for the ending credits. Thank you all for tuning in. This has been a presentation of Bald Spots Productions. I'd like to thank our producer, my beloved mother, Eileen Hatch. I, of course, am your humble host. I'd also like to thank my special guests, Colonel Tom Walker and not a Colonel, Chris Miles. Support the show if you feel so led over on patreon.com. We're known as Bald Spots Pro. Don't you dare miss YWL Online. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and wherever fine podcasts are offered. Be sure to tune in next time when my special guest will be Naresh Visa, founder and CEO of Krish Media and Marketing and author of multiple best-selling business books, and Michael Maynard, founder and CEO of O Nutrition and board member of the Rossmore Community Services District. Be sure to like, comment, and share. Subscribe, follow, whatever it is you've got to do to kick that algorithm into gear and help us reach more people. If you or someone you know needs support now, call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org. That is the suicide and crisis lifeline here in the United States.